The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on DCAA compliant time and expense reporting automation. I'm Rich Wilkinson from Unanet, and I'll be walking you through some of the functionality and benefits of Unanet's time and expense reporting today. Before we get started with the software itself, I'd like to tell you just a little bit about Unanet and our products. Unanet is one software to manage all aspects of your projects, your people, and your financials. It starts, of course, with the planning process, from CRM and pipeline management, all the way through to resource scheduling and skills management for your people, scenario planning for your projects and your organizations, and then to execution and this is where we'll be focusing today, timesheet data gathering, timesheet approvals, timesheet management, expense report, per diem management, and of course also in a future webinar, we'll talk about purchase orders and approvals, collaboration notes, and contract management. Once you have timesheet data and expense report data in your system, along with all the other stuff that we'll gather, you can monitor your projects with real-time dashboards, key performance indicators that tell you where you are and what you're doing, project status reporting, utilization, burn rate, charts and graphs, and all of the other things you would expect. And of course, what's the point of all that project planning, execution, and monitoring unless you invoice your customers for it? Our financials have complete GAAP compliance, full billing and invoicing capability with one of the most flexible invoicing systems I've seen, and I've been doing this for a long time. We support all the contract types you would expect and all the revenue recognition methodologies required by GAAP, even the new AS603 revenue recognition. And of course, on the accounting side, all the things you would expect to see in a full-featured financial system, from general ledger to AP, indirect rates and cost pool calculations, and even full purchase order matching and processing. Our clients tend to like us. In fact, they tend to like us a lot. Here's some of the things Unanet clients say about the product. They say it's a centralized product with a single source of truth, a single data repository, a single place to put and manage all the data associated with your business. They say that the reports and data you see in Unanet are current. Real-time reports, real-time dashboards, real-time KPIs give project managers and organizational managers the tools to see exactly where they are at any point in time. It's a consistent user interface that's very intuitive. It's easy to use, very streamlined. It's web-based with a secure cloud deployment that provides anywhere, anytime, any machine access. It's secure. We hosted Amazon Web Services for our cloud architecture, and that architecture facilitates DCAA compliance as well as the NIST cybersecurity compliance that most of our clients now require. It's a very efficient system. Our clients tell us that they have lower G&A rates and higher margins after converting to Unanet than with their previous system, simply because they're able to grow and scale without adding more personnel in the back office. Their growth profile does not require linear growth in the support organization. The support organization is able to achieve significant economies of scale as the rest of the organization and its revenues grow. And it's a forward-looking system. We think the best way to see the future is to invent it, and that's what we've done. Unanet allows you to scale, and these are just a few of our client logos from small companies, less than 50 employees, up through the 50 to 200, the 250 to 1,000, and of course, some of our marquee clients, well over 1,000 employees. Unanet now has over 2,000 total clients using our software. It's worth pointing out at this point that these clients that are under 50 employees, like SCS and Spectral Sciences, are getting exactly the same functionality with exactly the same software and all the same capability and functionality that those 1,000 2,000, 10,000 employee companies are getting. That's the real secret to Unanet, is the ability to scale so that the smallest companies can match the functionality and capability of even the largest of their competitors. We believe we're the leader in project-driven ERP solutions. In fact, enterprise resource planning, that's what ERP is all about, is a promise that a lot of software companies have been making for 10, 15, 20 years, and it took Unanet to deliver on that promise. This is an honest-to-goodness enterprise resource planning solution that lets you go all the way from plans to invoices and accounting in a single database with a single application and one security model to govern access to all of that. Our products have more than 20 years of production usage behind them, and yet the oldest code in our product today is only about 5 years old. We keep it current, we keep it functional, and we keep it up with technology. It's the highest rated project-based ERP on the G2 website. That's worth a look. If you'll Google G2 Crowd, I think they've actually dropped the crowd part of their name. It's just the G2 website. They provide intelligence on a lot of software systems. For ERP systems, Unanet is rated #1. Our closest significant competitor is number 6 or 7 on their rating scales. Unanet is a top place to work. We have been for several years now. Happy employees at Unanet translate to happy customers for Unanet, or at least that's the way we see it, and it's worked for us so far. We have a national network of partners with capabilities from one end of the country to the other, and significant expertise, not only in the Unanet product, but also in your market space. We have a partner for just about every flavor of customer that we have. Unanet is 100% developed and supported in the United States. Our developers are all sitting within, a couple hundred feet of me right here in Dulles, Virginia right now. Even our support is 100% US based, with support people here in Dulles, Virginia, and also in Denver, Colorado. We are proud to say that we've been growing at 30% compound annual growth rate for 3 years now, and for 3 years, we've been in the Inc. 5000 fastest growing companies. We think that our clients are able to achieve some of the success that they've seen simply because Unanet is so streamlined and so efficient. These, I won't read them to you. These are some of the things that some of our companies, and we attribute these to the actual companies and people that set them, are able to achieve with Unanet. Most significantly, one of our companies says that they've reduced their invoicing to 5 to 10 days, a reduction of more than 20 days from their previous achievements. And that translates to a reduced days sales outstanding, or DSO. As you know, in the project business, we live and die by DSO. There's something in the software business called a Net Promoter Score. Net Promoter Score is a measure of how well the users of software like this product in the company and whether they would recommend it to other companies or not. It's a complicated calculation, at least it's complicated to me. But basically, anything above about 10 or 15 represents a net promoter, someone who would recommend the software to another company. 13 to 15 in that area, even down around 10, is considered neutral. They're not a promoter, but they're not a detractor either. Unanet's net promoter score is 47%. The average of ERP systems is about 13. Our closest major competitor has a negative net promoter score, about -17. Let's talk about time and expense functionality in Unanet. Government contractors in particular have some very precise requirements for their time and expense policies. For example, in the GovCon world, time can't be reported in advance. You can't put a record on your timesheet for a project for next week or even Friday. at least not if it's going to result in cost to the government. Now, if it's a vacation entry or sick leave entry or a holiday, sure, you can put that in advance. But if it's billable or overhead or G&A that's going to be charged to the government, not so much. And a good system will preclude that from happening at all. If changes are made to an already saved timesheet, those changes are supposed to be audit trailed and recorded, and a reason for that change provided. Unanet provides that capability as well. In addition, we offer the ability to capture comments. You can put comments on any cell of any timesheet. You can make those comments mandatory so that for a specific project, for example, comments must be entered for all cells on the timesheet for that project, but you can also make it optional. And those comments can flow through all the way to the invoice. Now, I actually used to work for a company that flowed their timesheet comments all the way through to the invoice. I spent a good bit of time editing invoice comments, but it is a nice feature in some instances, especially if you have a customer that requires it. Reports are available on time, from timesheet status to delinquency of submission or updates. Extensive validations are also available, and the validations keep inaccurate data from ever getting in your system in the first place. And that's the number one place to catch an error, is before it occurs. Time periods in Unanet are completely user-defined. You can have multiple time periods in the system simultaneously, and the system can see weeks across periods. So if you have a semi-monthly time period that ends in the middle of the week, the system will look at that time period plus the days in the next time period to see across the week and determine whether, for example, overtime is appropriate in that week, even though the week's on two different time cards. We also offer considerable enforcement compliant in the access area. Users can access only their own timesheets or expense reports for entry purposes. Supervisors, of course, can access their employees' timesheets for review and approval purposes. Users are also limited to authorized projects, activities, or tasks, so they only see the things they're authorized to charge to. Again, the best place to catch an error is before it occurs. Approvers can't edit a user's time card or an expense report unless they have that administrator role. There are always circumstances where someone has to edit somebody else's time. If an employee leaves the company and is no longer available to make their own corrections to a time card, it may be required that someone else do that, but that would require an administrator role to do it. Password security is also very robust, and starting several years ago, we now offer multi-factor authentication for the system and for even for time cards. Workflows are a powerful feature of Unanet. Changes to save time are automatically captured in the audit trail. Approval workflows are user-defined, and those workflows are automated. You'll be seeing some of those live in the system in just a minute. And those approvals are also captured in an audit trail. Timesheet adjustments may be user-initiated, but they can be controlled and subject to approvals just as the original entries were. Users can be reminded of actions due or overdue via email for both time and expense. In fact, and they don't like it when I say this, but I'll do it anyway, the capability for electronic nagging is just wonderful. Of course, the purpose of the time card, expense reports too, but mostly the time card, is to capture project data. Project code and description are about as basic as it gets, and that's required on a timesheet. We need to know what the employee worked on and how much time they spent doing it. So on the left side of the time card, we're going to require a project code, and on the right side of the time card, we're going to require an entry to show how many hours were spent working on it. But there are other columns you can put on the left side of that time card as well. You can have a task breakdown, for example, within a project. In fact, the work breakdown structure support in Unanet is extensive. It is limited. It has a theoretical limit, but as a practical matter, no one will exceed the work breakdown structure limitations of Unanet I personally tested the capabilities the other day, and I simply gave up when I got down to 16 levels in the work breakdown structure. I concluded that no one should go to 16 levels in a work breakdown structure in the first place. It'll probably go further than that, but that's where I stopped. You can also have general and project-specific labor categories. You can expose a pay code column, a work location column, and even a project type column. Now, those are optional columns. All of those things could be defaulted from a table somewhere in the system. The most common timesheet exposure you'll see, and the one you'll see today in our system, in the demo system, is project code and task. We default everything else. All the other data is captured. It's just defaulted from another table rather than asking the employee to put it in. We find that the simpler you can make the time card, the more likely you are to get an accurate time card. You can also have notes or project comments for team collaboration. Of course, all of this stuff is to accomplish what DCAA or other government agencies require in a qualified accounting system. And that is the ability to segregate direct and indirect costs. We do that with a project code. The ability to segregate allowable and unallowable costs. Well, again, we do that with a project code. And those segregation mechanisms are very flexible. You can combine those for labor costs on timesheets, non-labor costs like travel, materials, and ODCs on expense reports. And you can do that through accounts, through projects, and through project types, all of which can be used to control that cost segregation. Enough PowerPoint. Let's look at Unanet. I'm going to log into the system as Frank Controller. Frank's a super user. So Frank's a system administrator. He can do just about anything in the system. I'm going to zoom in a little bit to make this a little easier to see. Now, before I dig into the timesheet itself and some of the functionality there, let me just give you a quick familiarization tour around the user interface. Down the left-hand side, you see a whole list of reports. You have shared reports. These are really powerful because these are reports that have been staged here by the system administrator. All of the parameters necessary to run the report have already been supplied. So for any report here, you can simply, with a single click, run the report. But you can also always go back and modify the criteria for that report. And when you do, if you choose, you can save that modified report as a My Report. That's your personal version of that particular report. And again, you can run that with a single click, like timesheet status, for example. That's a very popular report to run. I'll just run that in another tab here. So with a single click, I can see the timesheet status, all my users, what the current status of their timesheet is, all that information. Now, I can also have that in a chart. So I have a chart here for timesheet status, and it's showing me in a graphical display what timesheets are missing, which ones are in use, already submitted, in the approval process, a few disapproved, one, and a couple of timesheets or one timesheet that's already been locked and extracted all the way through the approval process. If I want to know who's in any of these pie segments, all I have to do is click on it. It's not just a picture, it's a live data object. And I can see here, Fran CFO and Frank Controller and GW have done part of their timesheet. They've entered some of these hours out of the required hours on their time card. And I can simply click that email icon, send Fran a personalized message, or GW. I'm actually much more likely to send this particular message to GW and say something like, hey, GW, were you planning to get paid this time? Across the top of the dashboards, I'm going to the home dashboard. That lives underneath the Unanet logo here. All of these dashboards, each one has their own graphs, their own charts, and you customize these dashboards to look the way you want them to look. Now, as a personal matter, when I come into a dashboard in Unanet, what I want to see is the things that my team are waiting on me to do. So I'm going to customize this dashboard right here, right now for you. And any user can do this. You don't need a system administrator. You certainly don't need Unanet to do it for you. All you have to do is click on this little gears icon. And what I want to do is take my approvals, the things that my team are waiting on me to approve so they can get paid or they can get reimbursed for expenses or whatever. I'm going to put those approvals right on the top of my dashboard, save it. And now when I go to my home dashboard in Unanet, when I log in, each time I log in, my approvals are right there at the top of my dashboard. I've still got the graphs and things that I like, but the things that my team are waiting on me to do are sitting right there at the top of my attention span, which is short enough as it is. You have many other dashboards, and the system's perfectly happy to let you work in multiple dashboards at once. So I'm going to open a project dashboard, time dashboard, and an expense dashboard. Let's go to time first. That's what we're here for today. So these dashboards, organizations, projects, people, forecast, the financials dashboard, documents, administration, or reports. And these dashboards are controlled by your access and your role. So a lot of users will never see most of these dashboards. In fact, some users only have a home dashboard, time and expense, and that's all they ever do in the system. The time and expense dashboards are unique. Those two dashboards are you and you only. On the project dashboard or the people dashboard, I might be able to see many different projects, many different people, all the people that I manage or supervise, maybe even people for whom I'm an alternate supervisor or an alternate manager. But on the time and expense dashboards, I see my own and only my own. So let's take a look at an in-use time card. Now, this time card is in the approval cycle. It's already been approved by one person, and the next person up in the approval cycle is Fran. Let's go into this in-use time card. And it's obvious when the time card comes up, Frank is on a semi-monthly time period. So down the left-hand side over here, we have those two columns that I was talking about, project codes and tasks. And looks like Frank is pretty much up to date with his time card. Let's just propose here that Frank is finished with his Tuesday work. He's been here since very early this morning. He's put in his 8 hours. You simply indicate that on the time card and save it. I'm getting a message from the system that says that customer one, the Study X project, requires comments for every cell of the time card. Now you'll notice that the previous entries to this project have a black diamond in the upper right-hand corner of the cell. That's because those already have a timesheet comment down here. And the system will not, it will let me save it, but it won't let me submit this time card until I put a comment in. So another timesheet comment to go along with the ones for previous days. So now that cell of the time card will also show that little black diamond, showing that it has a comment attached to it. Now, customer one here happens to be a commercial customer. In the commercial world, they don't have a lot of those government rules and regulations, and a lot of our clients have a mixture of commercial and government work. In the commercial world, the clients are not all that hard over about whether you enter time in advance or not. So Frank can actually enter time for tomorrow on this project, and the system's okay with that because that's how that customer was set up. Oops, it's wanting me to give a reason for the change that I made over here. You'll notice, though, that customer two is a government customer, and those projects are set up not to allow time in advance. So I'm getting a message from the system now, sorry, you can't enter time in advance for this customer. So it won't let me enter time in advance for that one. Now, in this case, Frank's going to take a vacation day on Friday, and he wants to enter that now. We'll call it a training day since Frank isn't set up for vacation. And the system, because of the way this project is set up, is perfectly happy to let him enter that time into the future. It's requiring that timesheet comment here. And of course, like any other timesheet, the paradigm is pretty well established. Rows are projects, columns are days, and the system totals columns, it totals rows, and it crossfoots everything to the bottom right-hand corner. Now, in order to put in something new, I simply go into the field and pick a project. Space Station's already on my time card, as is Big Data and StudyX. This is a project, though, that's not on my time card yet. If I want to charge to that project, I can also pick a task. Now, you'll notice here there are a number of tasks that Frank can charge to. And this work breakdown structure can go pretty much as deep as you want it to. This one only goes down to, looks like I have some 4-level items in this work breakdown structure. Some of these others either have no work breakdown structure or the work breakdown structure task is optional. For this project, you'll notice I have 1.1, and 1.1.1. Then I have 1.2. The rest of them are at the top level. Some of these others you'll notice here, I have 3.1, 3.2, and 3.2.1. I don't have anything below that. Frank only sees the projects for which he is authorized to charge. And he also only sees the tasks that he's authorized to charge to. And of course, once I'm finished with that time card, and I'm audit trailing all of these changes that I'm making here, and those will show up in the audit trail when I go to approve this time card. On the right side of the time card, I've been putting in things in whole hours. I can put things in fractions, and that is something that you can set at the individual level. You can also set a system default. This one is set up for tenths. It could be set up for hundredths, so I can put in 8.27 if I wanted to, or 8.3. You can do it in quarter hours, whole hours. There's lots of flexibility there. I don't have a holiday. Oh, yes, I did. I had a holiday in this time period on the 20th. That holiday can be pre-populated and often is pre-populated from the company's holiday schedule. Now, you could always take it off and charge to it if you worked on the holiday, but it is pre-populated for the user's convenience. Let's take a look at a different kind of time card. So I'm going to log out of the system here. And log in as an end user, Charlie user. And Charlie happens to be on a weekly time card. The system's perfectly happy to let you have weekly time cards, semi-monthly, monthly, bi-weekly, all in the same database. You can have a group of bi-weekly time cards that start on Monday and another group that start on Saturday. It's user-defined, and you can do pretty much whatever you would like. I try to limit the number of different timesheet cycles I manage in a set of books, but that's just a personal thing. And all the same rules apply. Customer one will allow me to charge in advance, but requires a comment for every entry on the time card. If I try to save an entry without a comment, it gives me a message and asks me to correct it. And Customer 2 won't allow an entry in advance because it's a government contract. I'm going to log out and log back in as Frank Controller. Because I want to show you some of the capability for reminders and notifications in the system. Now, Frank's a system administrator. So Frank has the access to the admin setup dashboard. Now, you probably noticed when I was logged in as Charlie user, I didn't see a lot of these things. All I saw was time and expense. And I think I saw financials because I can put in purchase requests, but that was it, that and the home dashboard. Frank, on the other hand, has access to all of this stuff. And some of the things that Frank can do are set up email notifications. Now, notifications notify users when an action has occurred. So an expense report, this is triggered when an expense report is set to in use. A manager approval, a manager disapproval, a project approver. Oh, by the way, time cards can be approved by each project manager as well as the HR manager for an individual. We also have a concept in the system of leave requests. So you can request leave for a future date. Maybe I want to take off next Thursday and Friday, or Thursday and Friday of next week. I can put that leave request in and ask my manager to approve that leave in advance. If I do that, I'll get a notification, or my manager will get a notification when I put the leave request in. When my manager approves it, I'll get a notification that it's been approved. If my manager disapproves it, I'll get a notification that that has happened. Now, that's the action side of things. We also do the inaction side of things. We call those reminders. So maybe you need to send a reminder to people who haven't put in their time cards for yesterday. That's a very popular one. You also have reminders that to project managers that there are timesheets out there that require their approval. Same thing for managers. So let me show you what that email looks like when someone hasn't put in their time card for yesterday. They get an email that looks something like this. Now, this one's coming through Outlook, so it has the do not reply indicator next to it. And the message is simple. Hey, you've reported less than the expected number of hours on your time card yesterday. Please update it daily. And you'll notice that there are two links provided. This is what we call deep linking. So these two links permit me to go directly to the time card that I need to update. It doesn't take me to my home dashboard. It doesn't take me to the timesheet menu. It takes me directly to the time card. Now, it does challenge me for my login credentials, so I have to give it a user ID and a password, but it takes me straight to the time card that I want to go into. And it looks just like you saw on the screen a few minutes ago. Now, I get the question all the time, can I do this on my phone? And the answer is absolutely yes. Now, if I click that first link there, the full timesheet link, and I do it on a phone, it's going to look something like this. Maybe your eyes are better than mine, but I can't read that. And that's a weekly time card. It's pretty small. Now, maybe if my phone is one of the more advanced phones and I can turn it sideways and the graphic will reorient, that's a little bit better, but still pretty small. And if it was a semi-monthly time card, it'd be even smaller still. So what we recommend people do is click that other link. That's a mobile time card link. That link will look something like this. Now, this is not an app. It's still running in a browser. It's a live connection to the database because we want real-time information in our database for our project managers. But the paradigm for this time card is completely different. Here, I pick a day, and then I enter time to the projects on the time card. And I have links to do things like add a project. And this is a weekly time card, so it's showing me all 5 days up here. If it was semi-monthly, I'd have 2 rows of days up here. And as I put entries in, the totals will be reflected up here rather than cross-footing the way the typical time card does. The number of different reminders and notifications that can be sent out is truly amazing. Now, you'll notice in this database, all of these are active. We really don't recommend that. You can fill up inboxes in a heartbeat if every notification and every reminder in the system is active. But pick and choose, pick the ones that matter to you, like this one, or project manager approvals that need to be made, those kinds of things. One last thing about time cards, and then we'll go look at expense reports. I'm going to log out again. This time I'm going to log in as Chris Director. Now, Chris is a project manager. And like me, Chris likes to see his approvals right at the top of his home dashboard. So there they are. There are Chris's primary approvals. Chris also has some alternate approvals. Now, an alternate approval is where some other manager has designated Chris as his or her alternate, so that Chris can approve expense reports or time cards in his or her absence. Very powerful capability, especially if you're one of those folks that's responsible for getting all those time cards at the end of the period so you can process payroll. Let's take a look at Chris's primary approvals. Chris, Director, is the approver for Frank, for Charlie, and also for Charlene. Now, these are expense reports. Easiest way to approve that expense report is click into that hourglass. And here I get to review all the items on the expense report, the total of the expense report. I get to see the approval history so far. And then I can approve it and go to the next one. I can approve it and return to the list. I could disapprove it. Well, let's do that. Just for grins. He's really going to hate that. We'll just send him an email. And when I disapprove that, instantly, Frank got an email that says your expense report was disapproved. Of course, it also says I was just messing with him. It would be more helpful if I said, please supply information about this, or please put a receipt on this item on the expense report. And just like the timesheet links, that email will include a deep link that will ask Frank for his credentials when he clicks on it, and then take him directly to the expense report in question so that he can fix it. And here are my time cards. Chad has a couple time cards out here. Charlie's got one, Clark, David, and Dustin. And I'm going to go through these time cards in pretty short order. I'll start with Chad here. And I'll just approve this time card. Looks good to me. And go to the next one. Approve that one and go to the next one. And then the next one after that. And just to show you how it works, now, anytime you do a disapproval, you must put in a comment. And that will be in the email that the user gets. I'll resume my approvals and I'll just approve, go to the next one. And I just approved 7 or 8 time cards in, well, less time actually than it takes to talk about it. Those approval workflows are user defined. They can be as complex or as simple as you'd like for them to be. Some of our smaller clients have one person that approves time cards for everybody in the company. Some of our larger clients will have an HR manager that is a supervisor, so to speak, and they approve time cards for people. Then the time cards would be routed to each project manager whose project was charged on the time card for a separate approval from each one. Those approvals can be serial, they could be in parallel, or a combination of those. And they could have a final approval by finance if that's desired. Okay, let's look at expense reports, and I'm going to log out and go back to Frank Controller for a minute here. All right, I'm going to go to Frank's expense dashboard. Now, you'll remember from a few minutes ago, all of these dashboards can look across the company except these two, time and expense. These are personal dashboards, and they're unique just to Frank. So I'm going to go to Frank's expense dashboard, and here are 4 expense reports that Frank has in process and an expense request. Now, expense requests are optional. Some of our clients use them, some don't. An expense request can have all the same data as an expense report, except it's a prediction. It's an estimate of what the trip is going to cost. So Frank is proposing here to take a trip to New York. He thinks that the expense is going to be about $500 for that trip. That's a pretty inexpensive trip to New York. And the supervisor can simply approve that. And I'm not my own supervisor, so I can't approve it. When that expense report or expense request is approved, it shows up on the this person's dashboard as an approved expense request. And after the trip is taken, you can take that expense request and simply copy it and make it an expense report. And just edit the numbers to correct them to actuals, and you're done with your expense report. It was all put in up front. Here are the 4 in-use time cards that are expense reports that are in process for Frank. He has one that's been disapproved. He has one that's in the approval process. Now, when you see something that says approving, I get questions about that sometimes. How can something be approving? It's either approved or it's not. Well, not when you have multiple approvers. The status approving means that at least one person in the approval chain has approved the time card, but there are still additional people in the approval chain that will need to approve that time card or expense report before it's completely approved. These 2 time cards are, expense reports are in use, which means that they're still in the process of being completed and have not yet been submitted to the approval workflow. Let's take a look at this last one down here, because it's got all the items in it that you might want to have on an expense report, and I can show you those. So we'll go in the edit mode, and you'll see things like airfare. And that came off of Frank's corporate card, his corporate credit card. Let's just stick something else on this expense report from that corporate credit card to show you how that works. If I click on the import button down here, it shows me all the transactions that are on Frank's corporate credit card that need to be put on an expense report. For example, maybe Dixie Bones barbecue. Wow, that was an expensive barbecue. We'll import that to the expense report. We'll do it as entertainment. Entertainment's automatically going to be an unallowable expense, but we're still going to reimburse Frank for it. So there are wizard details that couldn't come from the credit card data. And so I need to find that item, that entertainment item. When I put my cursor in the amount field, it's going to launch the wizard. I can also launch the wizard by clicking on this wizard wand over here. Both do the same thing. Here, it asks me if I have a receipt, who the vendor was, the location, the activity, the purpose. Who was there? Still $50 a head. It's still pretty expensive. Save that. Oh, it wants something for location. Now that, by the way, is all the information that DCAA says you ought to have for an entertainment expense. So I've already documented everything here. Now, if I have a receipt, I can attach that receipt by simply coming here to the attachments, choosing the file. If I'm doing this from my phone or tablet, I can take a picture and attach it directly to this screen. If not, I can save it on my PC, choose a file, and attach it right here. And of course, they're always available even after the expense report is processed, approved, and paid. You can always come back here and look at those attachments. Oops, I clicked the wrong X. Fortunately, it's easy to get back. Another really powerful capability here is the ability to put in per diems. Now, Frank is getting reimbursed for his meals and incidental expenses on a per diem basis. You'll notice there are multiple per diems here. There's one for December 2nd. There's one for December 3rd. There's another one for December 4th and another one for the 5th. And the reason they're in here day by day, first of all, Frank could have been in different cities on those days. He wasn't. He could have. But in this case, first day of travel, Frank doesn't get full reimbursement. Per diem for New York is $76 a day, but this was the first day, and under GSA rules, under the joint travel regulations, he only gets reimbursed $57 on the first day of travel. And of course, you may have guessed by now, on the last day of travel, same thing happens. If I check the last day, I get a partial reimbursement for the last day of travel. Now, on December 3rd, wasn't the first day or the last day, no meals were provided, so I get full reimbursement of the $76. But on the 4th, breakfast was provided by the customer I was meeting with. So all I have to do is check the breakfast provided box, and it goes by the GSA rules and subtracts out the estimated cost of breakfast from the per diem amount, leaving $65 for Frank to be reimbursed for lunch and dinner. Powerful capability. It's really hard for an employee to get this wrong if they fill it out the way it's designed to be. Another really powerful one is lodging per diem. When I put the cursor in that amount field, it asks me a lot of questions about my hotel stay. It wants to know if I have a receipt. If I don't, why not? It wants to know the vendor. Now, I wish I could make this make sense, but it'll take whatever you put in there. It wants to know my check-in date, how many nights I stayed. When I tell it I went to New York State, New York City, it tells me what the per diem is. And this comes from GSA's per diem files. We get those from the GSA website. They're updated typically a couple times a year. Every now and then you'll see out-of-cycle adjustments. And we process those files. We put them into a format for upload into Unanet. We put them on our website, and we send all of our clients a notification that says, hey, there's a new per diem file out there for you to upload into your system. When you do, it's all date sensitive. So if you're putting in an expense report and you traveled before the new per diems went into effect, it'll use the old rates. And if you traveled after the new per diems went into effect, it'll use the new rates. It takes that, the room rate that's on your expense report, or excuse me, your hotel receipt and the tax, and it calculates based on the per diem, how much is the total, how much is over the total, how much tax is associated with that overage, and then what the total overage is. So of the 1,080 that I expensed for my hotel, $1,036.80 of that I can charge to the government, and the other $43.20 is unallowable. The system calculates that for you automatically, and you'll notice it's inserted a new line here on the expense report for the unallowable part. That's because that goes to a different general ledger account. And that one's grayed out. The employee can't change that number. It's being calculated by the system and put on the expense report for you. And of course, all these other things are simply other kinds of expenses that I incurred on my trip. When I'm done, I save it. When I'm completely finished with my expense report, I submit it. And if you've ever put a comment like that on an expense report, you know how much good it does. So my expense report is submitted now. Frank Controller, by the way, is supervised by Chris Director. So on Chris Director's approvals list on his dashboard now is Frank's expense report for him to approve. It's real time. It doesn't batch it and put it up there at midnight tonight. It doesn't go up there on a weekly flow. It goes up there when I save the report and submit it. And it's the same way for timesheets. In fact, I missed this. I'll go back and do it here in a second. When an employee puts an entry on a time card, that entry on that time card goes into project cost in real time. So literally, if two of my employees put entries on their time card for today and save them, I can go into my job status report and I can see those two entries for today. And if somebody else puts an entry in this afternoon, I can run it again and see that time, the cost of that time entry shown on my project status report. Now I can actually hear the discomfort of some of the accountants out there that are attending my webinar right now. They're going, wait a minute, real time? We don't do real time. That stuff needs to be diluted. We have to do the total time accounting calculation. It needs to be posted in the general ledger. We need to make sure that everybody's approved it. Right, you're exactly right. And for accounting purposes, for billing, for revenue recognition, for cost in the general ledger, that's all based on approved stuff. But for project managers, you know, I ask project managers sometimes when I do this demo, would you rather see just about where you are as of right now, or would you rather know exactly where you are to the penny as of 3 weeks ago? You know what they tell me every single time? I'd rather know pretty close where I am right now than exactly where I was 3 weeks ago. And in fact, you talk to any project manager, it's the only question they ever really have. Where am I? Where am I and where am I going? Where am I going to end up 6 months from now when this project's over? Where am I? So let's take a look at that. I'm just going to go to my home dashboard. And I'm going to run what is arguably my favorite report in the whole system. There it is. It's called a job status report with actuals and plans. And you'll notice here, let me go back and run this thing as of a quarter ago. So instead of running it for the current year, I'll run it for the previous quarter. And I'll ask for 18 months of data instead of 12. The system is extraordinarily flexible for these kinds of reports. So now I'm starting in October last year, going all the way through March of 2021, 15 months out, with a whole job status report and a column for every single month. Now you'll notice that some of these have a little asterisk beside them. That indicates that this column is actual cost. Out here in the future, you'll see a plus sign, and that indicates that this column is planned cost. You'll notice in the month of January, I have both, and that's because it's actuals through today and plans starting tomorrow. Now, again, these project status reports are extraordinarily flexible. I could show the plans on one line, the actuals on another. I could also say, you know what, I only want to see posted data. So project managers have a choice. They can see real-time data or they can see posted data only. Completely up to you how you want to see this report. Now that I've selected plans and budgets separately when I run this report, now I get my plans and my budgets on separate lines. So I have a line for my plans I have a line for my actuals. And of course, I don't have actuals out in the future, but month over month, I have my plans and actuals for labor, for hours, for labor, average labor rates. And by the way, all of these lines on this expense or this job status report, they're user defined. So you get to decide what the lines are on your reports. If you didn't want materials and travels and subs and other on separate lines, you can just roll all those together and say, just have a total ODC line. Completely up to you, how much detail you want to show and how much you want to hide. Well, we've been through time cards, we've been through expense reports, we've been through approvals of both time cards and expense reports. I've even showed you some of the reports that come from that data and the fact that, and discussed the fact that you can have those reports in real time if that's what you want to see as a project manager, or you can have posted data only. I've also explained to the accountants that they don't get that option. They have to work with posted data only all the time, because that's how we roll in the accounting world. Everything has to be approved and posted. If there are any questions, I'd love to see them. I haven't seen any questions yet today. So I'll just say thanks for attending. And if you do have questions, be more than happy to answer them. You can reach me through the Unanet website or via email, rwilkinson@unanet.com. Thank you very much.